Welcome to another episode of the Business Speed Podcast. I am Steve Breitenstein here with Nick Brattain. We're lucky enough to have a guest with us today. We don't always have guests on the podcast. It's more Nick and I just kind of chatting it up. But today we have Coach Tony Holler, who, if you're in the speed community and even in the strength and conditioning community, you definitely know his name and feed the cats. Us in the speed community, we love kind of hearing his take on minimal kind of dosages and max recovery in order to help our athletes perform the best. Sometimes that causes some strife with some of our more conditioning-based coaches and our strength-dominant coaches, which we always enjoy a little bit of that on this podcast as well. But what we've really valued from Coach Tony Holler's career is the evolution of how he went from a high school science teacher, coach at a variety of levels, to now being a speed entity in this world, which for a lot of us is a hope, a dream to be able to monetize what we do in this realm. And a lot of us have gone in that coaching space in the high school, and it's really hard to get out sometimes and search out some of these opportunities. So we're going to talk through a lot of his journey along the way, some of his tips, maybe some of the land spots that you might struggle with a little bit. But Tony, thanks so much for being a part of this podcast today.
Oh, I'm nervous about this because this is, you talk about the business side of things. I did not come from a business family. I came from a basketball coach and a high school history teacher. So no, this is unique for me, but I think I have a unique story.
Yeah. So jumping right into it, I mean, you spent how many years as just a coach in the high school setting before you and Chris kind of linked up to start TFC? Because was that kind of the first real business piece to the speed side for you?
I think there were multiple little things that happened. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I came from, like generational poverty. I came from public education. I was taught how to live with nothing. What I didn't understand is how awful debt is. And we had 4 kids. My wife is a teacher, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that happened was I was asked to write an article for ITCA, Illinois Track and Cross Country Coaches Association. Mm-hmm. And I said, I've never written anything before. And I had gotten on Twitter, which is another big point. Twitter happened to me about 10 or 11 years ago. All these things seem to happen about the same time. And the guy, Ben Draper, said, it seems like you have a lot of strong opinions. And I think you could probably write an article or two. And so, 10 years later, I've written like 300. And I've only been paid for one. I got paid $100 for a Bleacher. I think it's called Bleachers. No, Stack online magazine. Paid me $100 for an article. And so I just wrote because I had a lot to say and nobody gave a shit what I had to say. Like in my normal daily life, nobody at school ever asked me how the track team was doing, ever. I mean, I had all this stuff and nobody to tell it to. My wife didn't want to hear me drone on about track and field and block starts and things. So I just had a lot to say. So I started writing. It was around that time that I saw a guy named Chris Korfis speak. And I didn't think there was anybody out there like me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying Chris is way weirder than I am, but he is on a different planet. Yeah. But we are the same in dosage. We are the same, which is a huge thing in training, that we both rejected the more of the Protestant work ethic in American sports and the fatigue seeking nature of miserable practice. And instead we were performance people. And we wanted kids, we believe that kids, when they look forward to practice, got more out of practice. Mm-hmm. And so number one, the articles, number two, the Twitter, number three, Chris Korfis. And of course I acted upon it. I mean, like the next weekend I was in Chris's basement. The next weekend I was at a practice of his. And here I'd coached for 30 some years and, the 3 state championships and stuff like that. But I knew that this was a guy that I needed to become friends with. It was a couple years after that we sat at breakfast together. Like we do that like once a month. And he said, were you speaking this winter? And I said, I think I only have one gig. He goes, I have none. I said, why don't we have gigs? And he said, well, I think that if you speak one time at a clinic, you're forever, like blacklisted to ever come back. It's like one and done. And, once you've spoken in Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois, you have nowhere else to speak. Yeah. So we started the consortium. We were smart. We had very low overhead. We didn't pay for our venue. And before you know it, we were attracting some really big names. And, and then that's probably the 4 things that happened to get me here.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I want to start. I started following you guys back in probably about 2014. When was the first TFC? It
seems like it was around 2014. I think it was probably summer of 2014.
Okay. So the first time I saw you was December 2014. I remember being in the high school. That's actually when I met Matt Gifford as well. He was with you guys. And so that's when I remember first being there. What was the catalyst to, I guess, what you guys wanted to share? I remember, having yourself and having Chris there and the information that you guys were putting out there, and obviously some of the guests that you had brought with you. But, outside of, hey, we don't have anywhere that we're speaking, we still have information that we want to share. What made you think to yourself, you know what, I think that we can do this annual thing. I think that we can continue to build on just what we've started.
Yeah, I think, the big thing was just the fact that Chris and I love to present. We love to coach coaches. And we think we have something to say, and there's not a better audience in the world than coaches. They are on the edge of their seat. They've drank coffee. They're just, when you've been a public school teacher for a long time, like Chris and I have been, we really appreciate a captive audience, an audience that is hanging on every word you say and taking notes. There's really nothing like it. So that was the main thing. The other thing was, we had about a year before that had Dan Fichter had happened upon a guy named Douglas Heel from Cape Town, South Africa. Dan went to see him in Europe, and Dan calls Chris and says, Chris, this guy might be the secret to performance. And so Chris started bringing Douglas over. That was Be Activated. And Chris, it was like $500 for a weekend to attend. And I said, I don't have that money. I mean, I was still totally broke. Totally broke. And so Chris invited me to come for free because I could write about it. And to this day, I don't think anybody's written more about Douglas Heel and Be Activated than I have. And so we had this amazing thing in our back pocket, activation, which is now RPR, reflexive performance reset, which is another whole story. But so the first one we actually called the Track Football Activation Consortium. So activation was actually a part of it. And the whole thing about including football in it was that we just saw football as the most traditional, barbaric, Neanderthal pursuit in any performance sport. That it was just, it drove us crazy to see the type of stuff that went on in football, and still does, even at the highest levels. I think the highest levels, I think the professional levels are really good. Some of the highest levels in the NCAA are really bad, and that's who gets copied. So we had all that going on, and the more we talked over breakfast, the more we thought, man, this could be like a cross-pollination type of thing. We could bring in, we could have a doctor speaking. We could have like we had synchronized swimmers speaking one time. We pull in people from different places in the country, and it kind of worked. It was like, I think the people who went, it's kind of like, I've never been to anything like this before. Yeah, this is different. And you know what's really weird? The people in your profession wasn't even a thought. I literally didn't know much about S&C at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought there were like people that liked the weight room, but I didn't know there was like a college degree that you could get called S&C. And so S&C people started coming to this thing and they liked it.
Mm.
So it just kind of went on from there.
Yeah. So I guess that leads me to my next point. As you started putting this together, how did your marketing for this change? You know, what was your marketing initially for the initial group of coaches in 2014, 2015? And then how did that evolve? I mean, I know what TFC is now, or what it's been over the last couple of years as far as traveling around, being at different locations. But, you know, how did you guys change how you were reaching out to others to let them know about it?
Well, I tell you, Twitter. I mean, Twitter is the best and the worst thing in the whole world. It is an amazing community of coaches. Even my coaches, you know, I've gotten a couple of Twitter fights in the last, or Twitter wars maybe in the last couple of days, but still it's okay. It's okay. I mean, like one Twitter war, I end up talking to the guy that I was making fun of on the phone for 30 minutes afterwards. So Twitter was really good. Of course, I'm good at Twitter. Chris is not. So that was a big part of it. Also was my writing. It was around 2013 after I'd written a couple articles that Freelap reached out to me, who is now Simply Faster, Christopher Glazier. Actually saw an article I wrote called Data Driven Speed Training. And, you know, being a smart businessman, he's like, we need this guy. And so, you know, Freelap started sending me stuff and, you know, and it kept me in, you know, stuff I could never afford, you know, I had now. And so I started writing for them. And so they developed a pretty big readership and, you know, with, you know, Freelap and then Simply Faster. And so like when I wrote an article about the consortium coming up, I think maybe a lot of people wrote, you know, like, you know, would read that article. We've had a website now for about 5 or 6 years. It's embarrassing. It's not as good as it should be. It's functional. Somebody can go to trackfootballconsortium.com and they can buy video recordings. They can see if there's an upcoming TFC and where it is. And then we have all the articles too that we have published on that website. So the website is kind of important, but it's kind of like the old-fashioned word of mouth thing that people liked it and told other people they liked it. And we never tried to get rich off of it. I think the most people we ever had attend was when Carl Lewis spoke. We had close to 300 people in attendance. And, you know, but most of them, I'd say we averaged between 100 and 120. We spoke at one in Sacramento last February that was a disaster turnout wise. I think we sold 45 tickets or something, but we had the greatest time, you know, because we could interact with the smaller group. And we have had Kyle Bolton from TCU there, and we got to really get to know him. And so, yeah, all those things just made it. Yeah, I think too that, you know, like the big wheels in the business, the big guys, Dr. Peter Weyand, who is like the greatest sprint scientist of all times. Like we were having a TFC in Dallas, and he asked to speak. He contacted us and say, is there a spot that I could sneak in? And I'm like, well, I don't know, you know, Dr. Wayne, you know, we have pretty high standards. No, I about melted, right? You know, like, oh my God. So it's really been a fun story for us. And I think if we would have tried to make it huge, maybe it wouldn't have been as good. I don't know.
Yeah. Fair. Have you felt that because of kind of that slow success of that, it's allowed this bigger growth for you as an entity? Is that where it's feeling like it's coming from? Is the origin is the TFC events? Does it feel like your ability to speak on bigger platforms now is more because of your writings? Where do you feel like that opportunity is kind of coming from?
I think it's from all those things you mentioned. I heard who's the guy the great astronomer that's on all the talk shows? You know what I'm talking about? The modern day Carl Sagan. Anyway, I'll think of it after I get off this. But anyway, he was asked, how can you answer so many questions off the cuff? Yeah. And I remember he said, because I think I've written about everything I've ever said.
Yeah.
And it's really an interesting thing. And I think that the fact that I have written so much, I've written a 400-page book that I haven't touched in the last 6 months. And I know I'll publish it someday. Yeah. But I'm a writer, so I write a lot. I love the Dylan song that says, "I'll know my song well before I start singing." Mm-hmm. And I think that the fact that I had, before I burst onto the scene, I'd coached for 32 years. Yeah. I was no man. My kids were all graduated and all that kind of stuff. So I think, the writing, the TFC, and then I think the quality of your stuffs, it either sells or it doesn't. And for some reason, I've really connected with a lot of coaches. A lot of coaches want to fight me, but Feed the Cats is called a cult by outsiders, and I like to say there's a cult-like following. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that, just three reasons. It wins. It makes the life of kids so much better, athletes, and then it makes the lives of coaches so much better. Yeah. So outside of that, it's maybe it's worthless. But I think those three things are really huge.
Yeah. Yes. And with that community piece, it's been the consistency of your interactions on Twitter, your writings, your active speaking and recording that and sharing it. Is that what keeps that community kind of tied to you pretty tightly?
I think so. And that's one thing that dates back maybe 10 years before all this stuff happened, like pre-Twitter. And that was the dawn of internet. It was around 99 that my family got first computer, and we were online. And it just so happened I just won our second state championship at Harrisburg High School in Harrisburg, Illinois, and I had email, and coaches started. There were coaches that would email me and ask me questions, and I found out, everybody loves to be asked questions. I think some people don't have the time to answer, so I've been answering questions really since 1999 online. Like I said, the first 10, 12 years was all, like emails. Coach, what do you do? What's your favorite workout for the 400, blah, 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 blah. And that hones your craft as well. When people are asking you questions like that. So if I look back, it's almost like I intentionally wanted to build a community, but that was never the intention. If you know what I mean, it was never the intention for me to be, I think I've spoken in 25 states and 2 foreign countries. That was never the intention. It was never the intention to write 300 articles. It was never the intention to create huge amounts of content on CoachTube and all that kind of stuff. So it's weird because there's so many people out there that are trying to be intentional, and sometimes people just get there and don't know why they got there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's your growth is so much like your philosophy when it comes to speed training. It was very natural. It was very organic. You cared. You had natural one-on-one interactions with so many people, and so because of that, people felt connected. I do remember going to those initial conferences, and it felt like everybody was connected. It felt like everybody knew each other, and even the presenters were personable, and it was easy to walk up and chat with them. And so it is easy to feel like a Feed the Cats cult member because anybody is reachable at any moment. And so because I feel like because of that natural growth, and you took your time, you weren't trying to have 300 or 400 members at a conference in the first couple of years. It made it feel very organic. You had talked about it a little bit, some of the other things that you have going on, but what did the evolution after TFC look like? You talk about some of the things that you're writing for. You kind of touched on CoachTube a little bit, all the other organizations you're presenting for. So after a few years of TFC, what were the thoughts from there? Were you thinking about how can we grow this? How can we make it more? Or was it just kind of an opportunity here and an opportunity there, and slowly, I mean, I know now you're with Les Spellman, and you guys are kind of working together a little bit. And so it seems like there's been a lot that's just kind of grown over the last decade. How did you go about all of this?
Yeah. Once again, it was not intentional.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing though, like I've been asked a lot of times, what is your business model? Like what is your future? Like, where do you want to be in 10 years? I'm like, I want to be alive. I'm 64. I want to be alive in 10 years and being able to think and write and stuff. But the one thing I knew is that I love being in front of people. And I love the fact that you said you felt like you belonged. I've said that so often, that you go to most clinics and you feel like you went to a clinic, but you go to a TFC and you feel like you belong to something. Mm-hmm. And there's that need to belong that is in all of us. And it's really crazy in our modern world, because we're so unattached, we're so individualistic, we're so, our sense of community is awful in the modern world. So yeah, we have created that. One of the things that, the fact that I wanted to be in front of people and I wanted to speak, I think makes me a good speaker. It gives me enthusiasm.
Yes.
Anywhere I go, I was at the NatCon, the high school strength conditioning clinic. And, I talked, like at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. And I don't think I stopped talking during the time in between there. Yeah. I was holding court with whoever wanted to talk and ask questions. And I looked down at my watch, I haven't peed in 8 hours. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah. All my bodily functions have been shut off because I just love what I'm doing. Yeah. And, I think that comes off, but I think there's also some quality. I've been around a lot of great sprint coaches, and I've learned from all of them. I've learned more in the last 5 years than I learned in the previous 50, so, I mean, it's so fun, as you guys know, it's so fun to learn new things and to evolve. But a couple of the things that were also kind of, like big boosts for me. One was totally unintentional. A guy named Marcellus Moore lived in our neighborhood, and he was the fastest when he ran for me as a freshman. He's a fastest 100-meter guy in the history of the world at the age of 14. We're not talking about that year. We're talking about in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. The next year, he became the fastest guy to ever run the state of Illinois, and he's only 15. To this day, he's only 21. He turned 21 8 days ago, and he's at the University of Texas. But he definitely, gave me some cred. Now, there are a lot of people that want to hammer me, like, hey, now you don't have Marcellus Moore, you ain't shit, and all that kind of stuff, like, like, guys, I've been coaching 42 years, and every year is just as important as the ones that he ran for me. Yeah. But there's no doubt that, a stroke of luck like that definitely gives you a little bit of cred. And then Championship Productions asked me to do a DVD like 5 years ago. And I'm like, do people still watch DVDs? And they said, actually, we sell more DVDs than we do live streaming. And I'm like, whatever. So they came to my school and I gave a presentation in my chemistry room. And that became their #1 seller, all sports. I'm talking Jim Harbaugh Clyde Hart, every #1 seller, all sports for the year 2018.
Wow.
And it's been their #1 seller in track and field ever since. Now, having said that, they gave me a sweetheart deal where they gave me a really good chunk of the money if people bought from my link. But if people bought from their link, it was only 10%. And I don't even put that link out there anymore because all my new stuff's on CoachTube. So they are literally, I think last year they made like 20,000 on me, you know, and I made 10% of that, you know, and so that's okay. But even though it wasn't a great business deal, you know, sometimes something like that is what puts you on a map or on somebody's map, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so CoachTube contacted me, and this is hilarious. You guys know who Hal Mummy is? You know, Air Raid. Well, Hal Mummy had a Air Raid certification course on CoachTube. And Wade Floyd, the CEO, calls me and says, "We think you could be the next Hal Mummy." You know, I'm like, no, I just got done reading The Perfect Pass about Hal Mummy, and he was like a total hero of mine. And he said, yeah, he made 100,000 last year on his certification course. And I said, well, okay, you know, so I started creating courses, and let's just say that they weren't all wrong. It literally, I have not done a course on CoachTube in the last 13 months, and sales have not slowed down. Wow. It's daily, monthly, and for people looking to get into the business, there's not a better platform, because from your link you get like 97%, and from their link you get like 70%.
Wow,
that's unheard of.
Yes.
You know, it's like, Wade, how do you make money? He goes, well, we got to deal in volume. You know, we have a small profit margin, but they do things so well for coaches. They don't make you sign any non-compete things, or, I mean, they're just there to support you. So I can't say enough nice things about CoachTube.
Yeah.